My husband enjoyed with his mistress while I was having a difficult pregnancy alone. Now he has no family and no home to come back to. When I, Jessica, 34F, met Eric, I genuinely thought I had found my forever person. He had that charming, easygoing personality that drew people in effortlessly. He was kind, funny, and had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world when he looked at me. We met through mutual friends at a backyard barbecue, and within weeks, we were inseparable. Our relationship blossomed quickly. Lazy Sundays on the couch, spontaneous road trips, and deep conversations under the stars. He was attentive and considerate, always the first to notice when I was having a bad day. Always ready with flowers or a heartfelt gesture. I adored him. And when he proposed on a quiet evening at the lake where we had our first date, I didn't hesitate. Marriage suited us. We built a life together, weekend hikes, brunch with friends, and late-night Netflix marathons. We laughed often, made plans for the future, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. So, when we found out we were expecting, it was supposed to be the happiest chapter of our lives. I still remember the morning I saw the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. My hands trembled with excitement, and tears welled in my eyes. When I showed Eric, he swept me into his arms and spun me around the room. Both of us crying with joy. We made plans immediately, debating baby names, planning nursery colors, and dreaming of the life we would build for our little one. But neither of us knew that this pregnancy, the one we had longed for, would be the beginning of the end. The first trimester was brutal. The morning sickness was unrelenting. I couldn't keep anything down, not water, not crackers, not even ginger tea. At first, Eric was supportive. He rubbed my back when I crouched over the toilet, held my hair, and stroked my clammy face. But as the weeks wore on, his tenderness faded. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. He started coming home later, making excuses about traffic or impromptu work meetings. He seemed distracted, distant, and emotionally unavailable. I blamed myself. Maybe I was being too needy or hormonal. I was always sick, always tired. My body was bloated and sore, and I barely had the energy to carry on a conversation. Of course, he would feel disconnected. Of course, he would be frustrated. Then came the missed calls and the secretive text messages. At first, I dismissed them. He had a demanding job, after all. Sometimes he needed to step away for business calls. But the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One night, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed repeatedly. It was close to midnight. My stomach turned when I saw the name L on the screen. Something primal in me knew. My hands trembled as I unlocked his phone. He had never hidden his password before. The first message was simple: "I can't wait to hold you again tonight. You drive me crazy, Redheart." I scrolled. The conversation was littered with texts filled with pet names, declarations of love, and plans for their next rendezvous. Photos of her lying in bed wearing nothing but one of his t-shirts. Our bed. My vision blurred. I dropped the phone, bile rising in my throat. My body convulsed in violent sobs as I ran to the bathroom and emptied my stomach. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever known. When Eric came out of the shower, I was still trembling, his phone clutched in my hand. "Joe. What's wrong?" His eyes flicked to the phone, and he paled. I held the screen up. "Who is she?" My voice cracked under the weight of the words. He stammered. He stuttered. He reached for me, but I jerked away. "Don't you dare touch me." After that night, everything changed. I wish I could say I left him right then and there, but I didn't. I was carrying our child. I was scared of being alone, of being a single parent, of making the wrong decision. So, I stayed. But I wasn't the same. I could barely look at him. The sound of his voice made my skin crawl. He tried, he brought home flowers, cooked me dinner, and slipped love notes into my bag. But it was all performative. The damage was already done. And my body continued to betray me. The hyperemesis gravidarum worsened. I was hospitalized twice for dehydration. I was weak and frail, barely able to sit up without dizziness overwhelming me. And where was Eric? He was sneaking away to her. While I lay in a hospital bed hooked up to 4 fluids. He was meeting her at hotels and parking lots, spending the nights that should have been mine in her arms. I remember lying in that sterile hospital room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the tears slide down the sides of my face. I clutched my belly, feeling my son's tiny movements, and I made a promise: I would fight for him. I would not allow my husband's betrayal to break me. The day I went into labor was chaotic and painful. My contractions were relentless, and my body, weakened from months of sickness, could barely endure the strain. The labor dragged on for over 15 grueling hours. Eric was there the entire time, holding my hand, wiping my forehead, and whispering apologies and promises I didn't want to hear. When my son was finally born, they placed him on my chest. He was small but strong, with wide, curious eyes and a full head of dark hair. I felt my entire world shift. His tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and I knew in that instant that he was my home. I barely looked at Eric. My heart belonged entirely to my son. The day I made the decision to leave Eric for good, I felt something I hadn't in months: clarity. The fog of heartbreak and betrayal lifted, and in its place was a cold, determined resolve. I wasn't just doing this for myself, I was doing it for my son. I waited until I was discharged from the hospital before putting my plan into action. I could have confronted Eric sooner, screamed at him, thrown him out in a dramatic fit of rage, but that wasn't enough. I didn't want fleeting satisfaction. I wanted permanence. I met with a lawyer the day after we came home from the hospital. My body was still sore, my stitches raw, and I could barely sit for more than a few minutes without wincing. But I pushed through. My son napped in his car seat beside me while I signed the initial divorce papers with a trembling hand. "Are you sure you want to file for sole custody?" my lawyer asked. Her eyes soft with sympathy. "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I have evidence of his affair. He was negligent during my pregnancy. He doesn't deserve to raise my son." In the days that followed, I moved with quiet precision. While Eric was at work, I sorted through our belongings, carefully packing his things into cardboard boxes. I started with the most obvious: his clothes, his shoes, his books. But then, I began to erase him from the details of our life. I took down the photos of us from the hallway, the ones from our wedding day, the vacation in Italy, and our first Christmas as a married couple. I tossed them in the trash without a second glance. I went into the nursery, the one we had decorated together with so much hope, and removed the blanket his mother had knit. I didn't want anything of his family near my child. I deleted his Spotify playlists from the shared account. I erased his favorite shows from the streaming services. I sold the watch I had given him for our 3rd anniversary. I didn't want any trace of him in my new life, and then, I made the boldest move. I sold the house. I called a real estate agent and listed the house without telling Eric. Legally, I didn't have to. My name was on the deed alone. Eric was reckless with finances, and early in our marriage. We had agreed to keep the mortgage under my name due to his poor credit. It was a decision that came back to haunt him in the best possible way. The house sold quickly. It was a beautiful property in a desirable neighborhood, and the market was in my favor. Within 3 weeks, I had a buyer. I used the profit from the sale to secure a modest but cozy home for my son and me, a place that was ours alone, free from the ghosts of my failed marriage. On the day the sale closed, I waited for Eric to leave for work. Then, with my son strapped in his car seat, I drove away from that house without looking back. I had the divorce papers delivered to his office, not our home. I wanted it to be impersonal and sterile, a reflection of how empty our marriage had become. He called me immediately. His voice was frantic. "Joe. What is this? Why did I get divorce papers at work? What the hell is going on? I was feeding our son at the time, calmly rocking him in my arms. I didn't answer right away. I let him stew in his confusion. Joe? Answer me. His voice cracked. Finally, I spoke, my voice devoid of emotion. Not. It means you're no longer my husband, Eric. You lost that privilege the moment you crawled into bed with her. His breath hitched. I could hear the panic in his voice, the desperation. Not. Please, Joe. It was a mistake. I was scared. You were so sick. I didn't know how to handle it. I was weak. I almost laughed. Weak. That's what he called it. As though his betrayal had been some fleeting lapse in judgment instead of a calculated, ongoing betrayal. I was vomiting my guts out in a hospital bed, and you were sneaking off to screw her, I spat. Don't you dare talk to me about weakness. Eric didn't come home until late that evening. I knew he would. He had probably spent hours at some dive bar, drowning himself in self-pity. When he finally stumbled through the door, he found everything he owned packed into boxes by the front door. He stood there, blinking in confusion. Joe. What is this? What's going on? I stood calmly by the nursery door, my son sleeping soundly in his crib behind me. My voice was calm, almost clinical. You're leaving, I said simply. He stared at me in disbelief. You're kicking me out? I nodded. You don't live here anymore. You have no family here. No home. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked utterly broken. He reached out for me, but I stepped back. The sight of his hand repulsed me, the same hand he had used to touch her. Please, Joe. Let's talk about this. I'll do anything. Just don't end this. Don't take my son from me. I stared at him coldly, unfeeling. You already ended it. You ended it every time you chose her over me. Every time you abandoned me when I needed you most. He broke down. He sobbed, messy, pathetic sobs. His legs gave out, and he sank to the floor, clutching at the edge of the couch like a drowning man reaching for driftwood. I'm so sorry, he wept. I'll do anything. Please, Joe. I turned away and walked into the nursery, closing the door behind me, leaving him sobbing alone on the floor. The divorce was swift and merciless. Eric had foolishly insisted on representing himself in the divorce proceedings, thinking he could win me back through mediation. It was a mistake. My lawyer was cutthroat. She presented every piece of evidence I had, the messages, the photos, the details of his neglect while I was hospitalized. He fought for joint custody, but the judge laughed him out of the courtroom. He was granted only supervised visitation. The financial settlement was equally brutal. Since the house had been solely in my name, he had no claim to it. His financial irresponsibility meant he had no savings to fall back on. I stripped him of everything, the home, the stability, the family. Eric moved into a shabby, one-bedroom apartment. Gone were the days of sleek countertops and stainless steel appliances. His apartment had mismatched furniture, cracked tiles, and a view of the alley dumpster. His family, once supportive, turned against him. His mother, who had adored me, called to offer her full support. I'm so sorry for what my son did to you, she said tearfully. He's not the man I raised. You and the baby deserve better. Even his closest friends, the ones who used to envy our perfect relationship, cut ties. They wanted nothing to do with a man who had abandoned his pregnant wife for a fling. Eric was truly alone. When Eric finally realized the full weight of his loss, he tried to come back. He showed up at my new home once, uninvited. When I opened the door, my face was impassive. Please, he whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. I just want to come home. I stared at him for a long moment, then shook my head. You don't have a home here anymore. And with that, I closed the door in his face. In the days that followed, Eric called me repeatedly. I ignored every call. His voicemails ranged from remorseful pleas to angry tirades. "Joe, please. Just talk to me. We can fix this," he sobbed in one message, but when the calls and texts were met with silence, his desperation turned to bitterness. "You're going to regret this," he sneered in another voicemail. "I'll fight for my son. You can't keep him from me." But he was wrong. I wasn't keeping our son from him, he had done that all on his own. Lauren, his mistress, didn't stick around for the aftermath. I had known from the moment I discovered their affair that she was no long-term investment. She was a fleeting indulgence, a cheap thrill. She liked him when he was confident, married, and stable. She liked the man who took her to fancy restaurants and shared witty banter over expensive wine. She didn't like the broken, humiliated, job-worn man he had become. A week after I served him the divorce papers, Lauren ghosted him. She stopped responding to his texts. She blocked his number. She quit her job and moved to another city. When he showed up at her apartment, hoping for comfort, he found nothing but an empty parking space and a "for rent" sign on her door. She hadn't even bothered to say goodbye. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Eric had cried on the sidewalk, slumped over with his face in his hands like a child who had lost his favorite toy. It gave me no satisfaction. It was just another sad consequence of his choices. Eric was convinced he could still fight me for joint custody. During our brief and bitter legal proceedings, he stood before the judge, dressed in an ill-fitting suit, looking frazzled and disheveled. He painted himself as a loving, dedicated father who had made a stupid mistake. He told the court he had been emotionally distraught during my pregnancy, unable to handle the stress of becoming a father. He claimed he ran into the arms of another woman out of fear and insecurity. The judge wasn't moved. My lawyer, meticulous and unyielding, presented every scrap of evidence I had gathered, screenshots of his texts to Lauren, time-stamped photos of them together, and detailed records of my medical complications during pregnancy while he was sneaking off to hotels. But the most damning part? My hospital records. The judge listened attentively as my lawyer outlined how I had been hospitalized twice due to hyperemesis gravidarum and how Eric had left me alone in the hospital while he was off with his mistress. The judge's expression hardened. He didn't look at Eric with sympathy, he looked at him with disgust. Eric's lawyer tried to argue that he deserved shared custody, but the judge wasn't having it. When the ruling came, I was granted sole physical custody. Eric was given supervised visitation once a month. That was all the father of my child was allowed, 2 hours in a monitored room with a court-appointed observer. Eric's face paled when he heard the ruling. His hands trembled, and he stood slowly. As though the weight of the verdict was too much for his legs to bear, he begged, "Please," he whispered. "He's my son. Please, Joe." But I didn't look at him. It's been 2 years now. My son is growing into a bright and curious toddler. His laughter fills our home, a home built on love and resilience, not deceit and betrayal. I have built a new life. I am thriving in my career, and I have found joy in simple things: morning walks with my son, cooking our favorite meals, and creating memories that are ours alone. As for Eric, he has nothing. No wife. No family. No home. He lives in a one-bedroom apartment, a far cry from the life he once shared with me. Alone and broken, he is nothing more than a shadow of the man I once loved. And I am free.